God is bringing the mission field to us, and there's a uniqueness to that. When and if the Lord gets a hold of your heart and says, we've got to engage. This is a big, big world. I think our commonalities are a love for the gospel, a hope for the world, a belief that God is indeed winning people to himself, moving our heart and our mind and our passion outward to our city, and to our nation, and to the uttermost parts of the world.
Thank you for joining Mercy Today. How do mercy and compassion break down barriers and change everything? How do they bring hope? Be inspired as our guests share about the life-changing, soul-impacting work through the ministry of Mercy, Inc. and its partners. Here's your host, Dr. Dan Critchett.
Well, very, very happy to have you here again. If you've listened to past episodes, this is yet another one where I get the privilege of talking to some people that God is doing great work in and through. And we talk about how compassion changes everything. And we talk about Mercy Today and the partners and projects that are functioning all around the world. And that's what we're doing. And I hope you listen to what we've got going on. And because what we know is that God is on the move around the world. And if you don't know that or haven't experienced that or haven't listened or read about that, you've got some good, exciting things to get into, because the reality now is that millions are coming to faith in Christ right now in this season. Tens of thousands of churches are being planted on all continents, and global missions are thriving, not without difficulty, not without opposition, not without persecution, but God is on the move. And so Mercy, Inc. and its partners are right in the middle of all that, and that's why it's so important and exciting for me to be a part of that. I've been a pastor for 40 years, and I've been in ministry for 50, and have done a lot of training internationally for pastors and missionaries and church planters. And being right in the middle of that, again, is just a great thrill for me. So I know that one of the keys is helping American pastors and churches see the big picture. Oftentimes we get so caught up in just maintaining the congregation and all of the things that we need to do with all of our time and our meetings and our staff and our projects and our budgets and all of that. But we get so focused on that we don't see the global realities of what's going on outside our borders. So here's an idea. Let's talk to someone who has been a missionary and is currently a lead pastor of a large American church. We get the combination. We get the best of both worlds, a missionary and a lead pastor. So there's lots to learn here. And pastors, I hope that this will be an inspiration on how to lead your flock in what God is doing for them to know and to be a part of it. And then so for members of churches, you may hear, and I hope you do, because that's the plan, some ideas to share with your pastor. If he isn't accustomed to hearing the podcast, maybe you could share that with him. So that's what our show is about today. And the title of today's episode is When God's Heart Moves a Pastor's Heart. So, listener, I want to welcome you to the discussion and invite you to really tune in and open your heart and hear God speak to you about the work that he's doing through his people. And it is various places around the world. We're going to hear a little bit about mission work that our guest has been in. And speaking of guests, I'm going to introduce him right now. He is Zooming in, thanks to modern technology. His name is Pastor Jim Gregory, and he is the lead pastor at Life Point Church. And do I say correctly, Jim, that it's Indianapolis, or is it Greenwood, or where is it?
It's Indianapolis. Yeah, it's on the extreme south side of Indianapolis.
Okay. And so again, today's episode is When God's Heart Moves a Pastor's Heart. So, Pastor Jim, thank you so much for Zooming in today, and welcome to Mercy Today Radio.
Thanks, Sam. I'm looking forward to it and appreciate being here.
We got lots to talk about, and we don't have very much time. We always have this conversation. We have about 23 minutes of actual dialogue time, so I'm going to be quiet, step out of the way, and get started here. So, Jim, you've been a missionary overseas and currently serving as a pastor of a church in the U.S. And how would you summarize what God is up to in our world? Since being a missionary and then coming stateside, I'm sure you stay up on mission work, particularly with organizations that you and I are both connected to. So how would you summarize what God is doing in our world today?
Well, I think it's short. He's doing what he's always been doing, particularly since the time of Christ, and that is he's building this church, right? He's making disciples, and he's using us and giving us the privilege of being a part of that process. And so the church is being built. Men, women, young people coming to know Jesus Christ from every tribe and every tongue, every language group. We're seeing God moving as He's always moved, and we live in strange times, obviously. But I don't think a whole lot has changed in the dynamic of how God is interacting with His people and interacting through His people, moving through His people to see the world won to Jesus Christ. So it's always a pleasure, obviously, to be on board on that, but with the Lord on that. But He's the mover, and we're the ones who are moved.
Excellent. And that starts, I think, with a pastor's heart, having been moved, using your word, by God's heart. And that is His heart. When He said to the disciples, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses here in Jerusalem," and then broadening out to Judea and Samaria and to the extent or uttermost parts of the earth. And that's what He's been doing these 2,000 years. Thank you for that summary. So you've worn both hats, and you've been in both positions as a pastor and a missionary. What would you say the two have in common? What do missionaries and pastors have in common?
Yeah, I think they have far more in common than they have that is in this continuity. There's very little that we don't do that we do together, and of course, all those have been called to know Christ, and who know Christ are missionaries in one sense or another. And there's all kinds of sayings and statements over the years that kind of we're all missionaries and we're all part of the missionary effort, and all that is true. There is a uniqueness, I think, to being a local pastor, particularly in the West and the United States. But we're all about the task of sharing the gospel. We're all about seeing people come to know Christ as Lord and Savior, encountering the gospel, the good news in Christ. And so we share that, at least we should. I hope that's at the heart of every missionary, at the heart of every pastor. I suppose there are some exceptions to that, but those are sad exceptions. So I think our commonalities are a love for the gospel, a hope for the world, a belief that God is indeed winning people to Himself, and has promised that would be the case all the way until the return of the second advent of Christ. And so we engage in that. We engage in it in some different ways. Obviously, in the local church, we're ministering to a congregation. I have a lot of other things I have to do rather than just get up and preach the gospel. But then again, missionaries have a lot to do that isn't just standing up and preaching the gospel. That may be our vision when we're the young people and hearing a missionary come in and talk. But there are so many things, so many different hats that missionaries wear, both stateside missionaries and national missionaries as well. So quite frankly, there's very few things that I would say this is uniquely different between a pastor and a missionary, other than the call for a pastor is to really shepherd a local congregation. And I think for a missionary, the call is more of an apostolic call, and that is to go to be engaged, for lack of a better term, to be a front line personnel on that. Even if they're serving stateside and serving in support ministries, there's a uniqueness to that call that I think that separates them out a little bit from that in the local church. But other than that, I don't think there are really significant differences.
So our location and our culture and often our language and the kind of people that we're working with and what our first line goal might seem to be, those can vary. And what I mean by that is if you have a congregation, maybe you're working on both cultivating the faith of a congregation and continuing to do that. But in the mission field, you are looking to reach out to others in that community or village or culture. But at the heart of it, I think perhaps a missionary and a pastor has this in common, that they are passionate and all in on the Great Commission, which is specifically making disciples. So not just converts and not just members, but making disciples, those who will own Christ as their Savior, those who trust in Him, those who want to serve Him and live His way. So that's constantly on the mind of a pastor and a missionary. Would you say that that's true?
Absolutely, absolutely. Right, we're all going. We're making. We are baptizing, and we are teaching. And there's a strong commonality there.
Exactly. You told me on the phone, Jim, that God is doing some amazing things, and I'd like to ask what some of those might be as soon as we get back from the break. So hang on.
I'm Brad Swinford with Salem Concrete Paving. It's a privilege to partner with Mercy Inc., who provides hope to people around the world by meeting critical needs and introducing people to Jesus. I know that through Mercy Inc., I'm investing in God's kingdom as they spread the love and gospel of Christ around the world. So please join me in supporting Mercy Inc. and Mercy Today Radio by praying or going to their website at mercytoday.global. Thank you.
Here is Mercy Inc. Executive Director Doug Hoffman with another Mercy Minute.
We're traveling across Africa, working with a project called Shalom Africa. And as we travel, you see many people walking. You see many people, some people have bicycles, some have motorcycles, some are riding on the overcrowded buses, but it's very difficult to get around. We work with a group called Village Church Planners. And those village church planners are responsible for a certain area. And I was talking to one the other day, and he was asking for a bicycle because his one church he's working in is 6 miles away from where he lives. 6 miles walking is a long walk. He said, if I could have a bicycle, I could get there in a third the time, and that means I could go to another 6 miles away and plant another church. Please give me a bicycle.
Now's the time to become a part of something greater in our community. You and your organization can partner with Mercy Today and change the lives of thousands around the world. Our team of business professionals can also come alongside you and help you grow your organization to maximize your impact. Our goal is to help you increase your quadruple bottom line: people, planet, profit, and purpose. Consider being a sponsor of Mercy Today. Visit our website at mercytoday.global.
This is Doug Hoffman, Executive Director for Mercy Inc. Just thanking you for listening to mercytoday.global.
We are talking with Pastor Jim Gregory, the lead pastor of Life Point Church in Indianapolis. The title of this episode is When God's Heart Moves a Pastor's Heart. So, Jim, before we left for the break, I introduced the question about you saying that that God has moved in some amazing ways. I wonder if you could give us some examples of how you have seen that happen.
Sure. Yeah, I think as we talk about it in a global sense, I don't know that we've ever seen a time like this, and I suppose anybody could say that at any time. But this is we're in this time, right? And it's a unique time. Look what God is doing in terms of taking folks that we used to have this sense that we had to go to them, and now they're coming to us. And this isn't just in the last year or two. This has been happening for a few decades now here up in the West. But God is bringing the mission field to us, and there's a uniqueness to that. And so I think that's an amazing thing. That maybe 150 years ago, 200 years ago, when missionaries were being prepared to go out to the nations, it really was about preparing them, usually from the West, and heading out someplace.
Right.
Now they're coming to us, and so we have a mission field right at our back door. And so globally, I think that's an amazing thing that God is doing. At least locally, for me, I've seen the Lord move at Life Point Church in wonderful ways, and encouraging people in missions and seeing people go in missions. And quite frankly, just as simple as missions funding has been a wonderful blessing. People have a heart for missions. They're giving. We're sending. People are going. We're engaging. We're far more focused than we were 5 years ago. Far more focused 5 years ago than we were 10 years ago. God just seems to be moving us in such a way that we are better prepared to be engaged in missions locally and globally. than we really ever have been before. And certainly hoping and praying that God's going to continue to do that. But then, as I just said, seeing Indianapolis has become a great hub. It's about the 12th or 13th largest city in America, depending on who you ask. And it's becoming a hub for all kinds of immigrants and refugees. And they're right here in our door. So,
has your church found ways to respond to the presence of those other cultures and languages in your community?
Well, I think it's fair to say we're finding ways.
Yeah.
We found we don't have a magic bullet that I can say, look, Pastor, if you'll do this, you'll see them come. But we're finding ways. And I'll tell you, honestly, one of the best ways is just to see some of these folks come to the church, either as folks who already know Christ or coming to know Christ and coming to the church, and then seeing them really become witness to their own neighbors and friends from whatever ethnic group that they may be from, and bringing them in. So honestly, a lot of the work is being done by them, and it's not because we've got some great program that draws the masses in.
It seems like there's a lot of homogeneity going with cultures and languages and ethnic groups, and something that some churches might want to consider listening in here is that if you have some Christ followers from another country or from another ethnic background, that they could actually host, what do you think about this, host like a fellowship group or a Bible study or something, invite their own, and I use the word tribe very generically, I don't mean Native American Indians, I mean people who have a lot in common, who love and trust each other and might find it awkward or uncomfortable to step into a church where they're obviously a minority or they stand out. Is that something that you would endorse, that pastors and churches could look at that if we have someone from another culture or another ethnic group, to strategically plant those kinds of home groups and fellowship opportunities outside of the regular worship patterns of the church?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, I think that can be incredibly helpful to people. Yeah. And look, I've sold all my belongings twice in my lifetime with my wife and 2 children and moved to another culture. Yeah. I know what it's like to be out of place and to hope for a connection point with somebody who will draw me in and teach me cultural norms and help me with language acquisition and help me figure out how to do banking and where to go grocery shopping. And so those kind of very simple things that we can do are also incredibly helpful. Going out, we did last year, 2 summers ago, we did a BBS. We took to a local apartment complex that was mostly Hispanic immigrants and did a couple of soccer clinics for the kids and brought snacks and things like that. And we found out that some of the snacks we brought were really more American snacks than the snacks they were looking for. Yeah. But we went to them in some of those instances. Some of it is we wait to see how we can engage. And again, my goodness, the fact that most churches have these facilities that can host groups of people to come in and say, here's a place to come in and get out of the heat or the rain or the cold and engage as a group and do ministry together. Those are wonderful opportunities to serve and engage.
It sounds like what you might be saying is that a church or an individual or a group could be involved in missions without leaving home.
Well, there's no question about that.
Yeah, I like that. I wonder if that is maybe a new thought to some. One of the very effective and long-term ones, we've been doing this for a long time, is ESL. When we have Spanish-speaking immigrants, legal and otherwise, that are in our communities, we can offer English as a second language, and then they will come, not for the church, not for a Bible study, but to learn the essentials of getting around and communicating. So Jim, I'm always watching the clock, and we will have some afterwards, but for the radio portion, which does have a limited clock time, I'd like us to get into that 4-part process for a church becoming what God has called it to be. And we have a little bit of time left, and if we can always spill over into the rest, for the afterwards. But I've got, for the first step, and correct me if I didn't get this wording right down, but you talk about taking an assessment of the congregation. In other words, where are we now? Now, I'm assuming a new pastor can always do that. or maybe during the absence of the previous pastor, the church has taken the initiative to do that. Okay, where are we? What is current with us? But what does that look like? How does the congregation do that part, taking an assessment of where we are now?
Yeah, I think you mentioned that when a new pastor comes in, that was the case for me when I came into Life Point 12 years ago. Came in not directly off the mission field. I had served just for a few years in another role, in a pastoral role, but came in with this heart for missions, but knowing that the Lord had placed us now in a local church, and I wanted to get together with the church. Obviously not every individual, but my first step was to find out, hey, do we have a missions team? If we have a missions team, I need to meet with them. In fact, when I came to Life Point, part of my interview process, when it looked like the position was going to be offered to me, my first meeting was with our missions team, to say, tell me what we're doing in missions. Tell me what the heart of these people, where it lies. Do they have a heart for missions? What needs to be done? Obviously, I didn't come in to say, let me tell you all the things I'm going to do to change how we do things here, because the reality is the pastor before me had a heart for missions as well. We just had a different approach on how we would do it. If you're not a new pastor, I think when and if the Lord gets a hold of your heart and says, we've got to engage. This is a big, big world. And our call is to take the gospel to the nations. And if you get that heart, even if you've been in the church for 30 years, how do you now sit down, get together with your leaders? Where is our church going? What is our mission? And how are we going to fulfill the Great Commission locally and globally? What can we do right now to say, where are we at? And what are some steps we can take to start moving in the direction of engaging, not just locally, but moving our heart and our mind and our passion outward to our city and to our nation and to the uttermost parts of the world.
Planting a vision, and depending upon the situation, it may be that that's a new thought or a new passion to that particular congregation. And I would say, even if it's not a new pastor, but a pastor with a new heart, and maybe a pastor that goes on a mission trip, or a passion that goes to a conference, or is influenced by a missionary or by a missionary organization, a pastor can come back and say, "Hey, folks, I've had an encounter that I need to talk to you about." And so, if the pastor's not willing to drive the bus, then the church isn't going to go that way. Or if the pastor is willing to drive the bus but doesn't know where he's going, that's a whole other matter. So, Jim, I'm getting the signal here in the studio. By the way, you're getting thumbs up here in the studio. We're loving what you're saying. But I want to make sure that we hear the whole thing of the rest of the other four parts. We've talked about the first one, about taking an assessment, and I think we're going to put that over onto what we call the parking lot, or the afterwards. So we're going to wrap up this radio portion, and we use the word tease. We're going to invite people to stay on the podcast, or if you're listening to the radio, go to the podcast, go to mercytoday.global and find the podcast and listen to the rest of this, The Pastor's Heart. And what I would say, if a pastor has been either fairly new or has been there for a short time or been there for a long time, the title of our show is When God's Heart Moves a Pastor's Heart. And Pastor, God can move your heart, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to capture your heart, and he wants it to move to what he's doing and what he wants to do, not only globally and around the world, but right there in your congregation and in your community. So we've been talking with Jim Gregory, lead pastor at Life Point Church. And Jim, I'll just ask you this. If you could say one thing, a short phrase or sentence to our listeners, both pastors and lay folks, what would you say right now?
I would say God loves the world, and he wants to see people come to encounter his son, Jesus Christ. And we're a part of that. We need to engage.
I love it. I knew I could count on you to say something really profound like that, because you've seen it all and you're still involved, you're still engaged. I don't think you're the kind of guy that's going to retire at 62 and then go play golf and fish day after day. Fishing, yes, but fishing for men, right? So, yes. Folks, our time is up. This is Pastor Jim Gregory, lead pastor at Life Point Church. And you want to go to our afterwards on the podcast portion at mercytoday.global. Of course, there you can hear all of our shows. We've had some wonderful guests and still more to come. So this is Jim Gregory, lead pastor at Life Point Church, and the title is When God's Heart Moves a Pastor's Heart. And may I say this, Pastor, if you're not sure whether God has moved your heart or does he occupy a leadership role in your heart, then ask him to do that. Ask him to move your heart. And I think you'll find not only are you different, your people will be different, and the way you lead will be different. So, Jim, thank you again so much for zooming in today, and God bless you. As we take a break, we'll come back at the afterwards.
How do you multiply your time, talent, and treasures? By investing in Mercy Today. Whether it's going on a mission outreach halfway around the world or sharing your insights and experiences with others in our local community, our team of business professionals can help you multiply what God has given you. We can help you grow your organization so that you and your fellow work associates can utilize your talents for even greater causes as you multiply your resources to do even more. Join us and become a sponsor of Mercy Today. Visit our website at mercytoday.global. Have you been looking for new ways to grow your organization and have a lasting, eternal impact? Mercy Today has an amazing team of business professionals that have managed small businesses to large corporations, and we want to share that know-how and experience with you. We're also committed our lives to sharing the gospel with compassion and serving the practical needs of communities around the world. Partner with us and become a sponsor of Mercy Today. Visit our website at mercytoday.global.
So helpful and good and healthy talking to Pastor Jim here. If you have questions about the topic that we're discussing today or want to learn more about Pastor Jim or about anything that he has said, go to our website, mercytoday.global. Click on the contact form and ask a question or provide some feedback or input. We would love to get that to you. We want to connect. We want to engage. We want to help you in your walk and in your accumulating of different insights and information. And also you can ask for a Mercy Inc. Impact Report. We'll send that right out to you. I want to thank you for listening today. This is Mercy Today Radio, telling the story of how compassion changes everything. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Critchett, wrapping up this episode. And until next time, may God help you be a part of what he is doing in our world today. Join us on the show or anywhere on our website, mercytoday.global. God bless you, my friend, and goodbye for now. We are back, and this is the afterwards portion of our talk with Jim Gregory, lead pastor at Life Point Church in Indianapolis. By the way, we don't record in Indianapolis, but we have friends there. We have a major partner in that area in Greenwood, actually, if you know the geography. One Mission Society, OMS, is there. And so, in fact, several of the key leaders at OMS attend at Pastor Jim's church there at Life Point. So what I want to say before we finish up this list, and that's where we left off, the four-part process for a church becoming what God has called it to be. I guess I want to speak first to the pastor and say, Pastor, if this is new to you, or if you're just kind of learning or just kind of stepping in and kind of getting warmed up to these things, I hope that either you contact Pastor Jim or contact us at Mercy Today, and I hope that you will just ask God to give you wisdom and that God would capture your heart, because the title of this episode is When God's Heart Moves a Pastor's Heart. And Pastor, would you just pray and ask God to move your heart with his? And I think you'll find, as we said previously, that God will move and is moving in some amazing ways. If I could speak just briefly to the members and leadership of the church too, if your pastor doesn't seem to have evidenced these things yet, I'll start with that category. Would you pray for him? When he's up there preaching, you pray for him. Pray that God will capture his heart. And whatever's going on, whatever your relationship with him, just pray. Just keep praying. When he's preaching, when he's leading, when he's talking, whatever it is, just pray that God will move his heart and you'll see some amazing things happen. So when that does happen or is in the process of happening, then we can move on to some other steps. And so Pastor Jim is going to help us with setting reasonable objectives. Okay, so we've taken a lay of the land. We kind of do some observation and note-taking and talking about where we're at as a church. You know, some churches are very effective and very successful, very just really doing some wonderful things. But you know what? They started with where they were. And that's where you are now. You are where you are. And you can chart your own course. You can set your own future. You can make amazing changes in the difference of how God works in and through your church if you ask him. So let's go into that step. Jim, you back with us again on Zoom?
I am, yes.
Great. Thank you. Everything's working good. So setting reasonable objectives, we're talking about maybe a mission statement or desired outcomes. How would you express that? And how would you lead a congregation? I want our pastors to be listening in on this. How would you set reasonable objectives, maybe short-term, long-term? How would you approach that part of the process?
Well, I think you have to engage with the people. Again, at our church at LifePoint, we have a missions team made up of lay people, and so you have to engage with them. And when I came into LifePoint, that's what I wanted to do: engage with them, give them an assessment. Where are you all at? Where's your heart? For missions and the gospel. And by God's good grace, the folks, they love the concept. In my estimation at the time, there were some things that needed to really be approached to streamline things and to make our missions giving and sending more effective. And so after kind of giving the lay of the land through the missions team, obviously as I was interviewing with elders and others, expressing my heart for missions, how I would be preaching, how I'd be approaching, encouraging people to give financially and to go in missions. Then what you don't want to do is say, now here are, 15 objectives that I have, and I hope to have them done within the first year. And we're going to be, at that time, LifePoint was a church of about 500, maybe 600 people. I wasn't about to say, look, we're going to be a church of 4,000 in 5 years, and we're going to have this much money, and we're going to be doing this in mission. So again, you do have to be reasonable, and you have to understand that you have to bring people along with you. You mentioned earlier, Dan, the concept of driving a bus, and you also don't want to be driving a bus that's just empty, with you on it, and here we go, and nobody's on the bus with you.
Right.
So you do have to make sure that people want to get on that bus. And I think sometimes when you're saying, hey, this bus is going to Timbuktu and it's never coming back, you're not getting a lot of people jumping on board.
Yep.
But if you're talking about taking some incremental steps, I think you can engage people in such a way that they get excited about it and want to jump on board. And so for us, the reasonable objective was, as they told me, here's all the mission agencies and people that we support. It was too big and too broad. And there were people that we didn't even know anymore. Nobody knew. Someone had been on a missions team 10 years ago, and they knew somebody down, in Florida or, overseas in China. Yeah. And they talked the team into engaging with them. And then we've never heard from them for the last 8 years. Don't even know where the money's going other than we're sending a check.
Yeah.
And it was a small check. Let's send $100 of this person, $50 of this person. And so I said, let's draw it down. Let's really engage. If we know somebody that we want to engage, let's engage in such a way that how we give will be impactful. And let's insist that they stay in contact with us. And if they're not, then the first thing we need to do is we need to start whittling this down. That doesn't mean just throwing people out or mission agencies out. Let's contact them. Let's give them a reasonable time to return. And if we don't hear anything from them, then, in 6 months, let's say we're done. And if we don't have any connections anymore with them, let's let them know, hey, in another year, I think we're going to be drawing down on support because we're going to start bringing this into a package that we can deal with and that we can actually engage with these missionaries and these agencies in a way with a dollar amount that actually makes a difference.
Yeah.
Not, again, $50 is $50, but for a church, I said, listen, I want to get to the point where if we are going to engage with a missionary or mission agency, our starting number is $500 a month. That's where we start. And therefore, we're going to have to be convinced what you're doing is what we want you to, not, what the board wants you to do, but we want to engage in that with you. We want to help you significantly and then we'll go up from there. But to do that, we had to draw back the giving package over the next year or two.
So it sounds like you want to create and support a real partnership between the church and the missionary, and not just send a token amount. It sounds like that what had happened over years by that explanation, not just a token amount, but you want to have a partnership. So I know that donors, whether they're major donors or a little at a time, they love seeing the results. If I could say this one thing, at my church, we are making these salvation story bracelets. I have one right here for those who have a video you can see. And my little church, we have made almost 6,000 of them, and they enjoyed coming out. They enjoyed, even with COVID, we got it done. But what the great thing was, when the team went to Haiti, that was our focus with the Starfish kids, and they took some pictures of these little Haitian kids with these bracelets on. And in fact, they had 2 of them on, and we're thinking, what's up with that? And in the notation on the Facebook page, it was one for them to keep and tell the story, but another one for them to share with somebody else. And so my people just were thrilled just to see that, because they had put in a lot of hours, but that's a connection. Some of them are now stepping up to sponsor a child in Haiti, and some are contributing to the ongoing project of making those little salvation story bracelets. So reasonable objectives. By the way, what is the mission statement of Life Point Church?
The mission is to engage all the nations with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So it's very, very simple.
Yes.
And that can break down into other categories, right? It starts within the church family.
Right.
It grows outward.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we're engaging with our community as well. And so we have different missions projects that are really just geared towards our own community. I don't mean Life Point, but I mean our the south side of Indianapolis, down to about city center. And then we want to engage, with our own nation, people we know the culture, we know the language.
Sure. Right.
People in the United States need to know Jesus just like everybody else does.
Right.
And then to see that move outward to all the nations as well. Really, in some ways, following the model of Acts 1:8, right? That's a very simple model that we've been given there. I don't think that model was intended to be start here, don't do anything else, then go to the next one, go to Judea. I think we're doing it all at the same time, or at least I think we should be. But we have to remember that we have a responsibility, right? Moral responsibility to the people that we are interacting with on a regular basis. But we cannot become so inward focused that we forget that there's a world out there. This is where short-term mission trips are so beneficial.
There you go. Yeah.
For people out there and seeing that it's a big, big world. And then coming back in almost every instance, with a heart pumping for Christ and for the gospel and for mission. And now all of a sudden you've got a groundswell of people within your own congregation who are saying, when you preach about missions, are saying, yes, I believe in that. I've been there and that's true. And let's do that.
I appreciate your mention about short-term mission trips. And folks, if you are even a little bit interested as things open up a little bit more for travel, contact us. Go to mercytoday.global and let us know, hey, I might be interested in going on a mission trip. Let us know. So, Jim, would you say the mission statement again for Life Point?
It's engaging all the nations with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, that's specifically to missions, right? Yeah. We also have one that's with our own local body as well, as we worship, grow, connect, serve, and share.
There you go.
This is more of an internal with us as brothers and sisters in Christ engaged at Life Point Church. So.
And imagine you use that in your leadership. I mean, it's on your print material. It's maybe posted somewhere in the hallways of the church. And your bus that you're driving has that on the side of it, right? And so people, come on, get on this bus. And this is the name of the bus. And this is where we're going. So thank you. Thank you.
Messaging is important, even for your own people.
Yes, right? Absolutely. Because oftentimes people will say, what is this all about? Why are we here? Okay, I go to church, I stand up, sit down, sing, listen. What was that all about? But then you go back to the mission statement. It keeps reminding everybody why we are here. So great. Thank you. Let's move on to the next one. The critical role of messaging. So you talked about the message from the pulpit. Do you actually use a pulpit? Some do, some don't.
Well, it's not the big, solid oak one that's 8 feet wide, but yeah, we still use a pulpit.
Little music stand, maybe for your notes or Bible or something.
I'm not overly fan. I'm 55. I'm not a super fancy techno.
Yeah. So messaging. There are series and there are topics and there's lectionary approaches where, you just kind of take a whole book or, and preach through that. What is your recommendation and your practice for tying messaging in with the mission?
Yeah, well, we at the Life Point, we preach, in an expository manner. So we, generally speaking, are going through books of the Bible. Right now, we've been a year in the book of Genesis, and we've probably got another 6 months to go.
Wow.
Now, we do take breaks occasionally, but we also have a specific, every single year in September, we take anywhere from a 2 to 4 week break where we just focus on missions. And we will take a break from whatever series that we're in. And we just call it our missions emphasis. And everybody who's been a part of Life Point for any given amount of time know that we're going to do a missions emphasis for anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. We'll focus on different things. Those are topical messages. Primarily, I preached through Jonah once as a kind of a 4-week series. And it ends at the end of the series, we take up what we call a faith promise, which is this: every penny that you will give and you will pledge to next year, every penny will go to missions. So we're not like some churches where we say, hey, we're going to take a general budget and we're going to give 5, 10, 15% of that to missions. We simply say, here's a general budget. Here's a missions budget. Everything you give to missions will go to missions.
Yeah.
Every penny will never draw it over to our general fund. And then we just, the goal is at the end of that series to say, all right, here we go. Come up with your pledge cards. This is for the next year. We will budget to the penny that what you have pledged, and we will go out and we will use those dollars for missions.
So I've done this. I wonder if this is what you're saying, that when I use the term faith pledge, we ask our people to pray about God giving an amount to your mind, and maybe it's not something you have, or you make that withdrawal and give it to missions. But a faith pledge is said, God, if you would give me, let's just say a number, if you would provide $1,000 for me, it's going to go on to missions. And then you watch God work, and you watch people get excited about that, because money seems to come out of nowhere, right? And yet God funds his own work in those kinds of ways. Have you done that, or is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, we have done that. And again, on those, I think I encourage people to be sensible and reasonable as well. Yeah. If you make $50,000 a year, it may not be real reasonable to say, God, I'm going to give $50,000 to missions this year. So certainly you have to intertwine faith and the noggin that God has given you to make reasonable decisions, because we don't want somebody pledging $50,000 and all they're going to end up doing is with one, because we're going to budget on that 50 that they told us. Yeah. And certainly we want to encourage people, step out, do some different things. If you don't have a whole lot of discretionary income, what is it you could do next year that would generate $500? Mm-hmm. What I've tried to encourage people to do is, listen, there's some people out there in our congregation, in most congregations, who God has blessed you. You have a lot of discretionary income. Use it for the glory of God. Yeah. Use it for the glory of God. And I can think of no better way than to engage in missions. And I always encourage them. My wife and I, the bulk of our missions giving comes through this faith promise. We support some other missionaries individually, but the bulk of it comes because we get to see our dollars grow exponentially as we come together as the body of Christ, the local body of Christ, and say, here's what I gave, but here is the whole number. And I'm engaged in all of these mission outreaches now. My dollars are doing that. And so I've encouraged people, listen, if you can only pledge $10 next year, do it. Don't say I don't have money, so I'm not going to engage. Your $10 is engaged in mission, and you're as much a part of our mission sending and giving as I am. or
Yes.
the guy or the gal that can give $50,000 to mission.
Right.
You're engaged, right? God's not checking that your how much your check was for to determine how much you receive the blessing. It's about being involved and being engaged. So that's what I try to encourage people to do. But certainly, we call it a faith promise for a reason, and that is because by faith we know that God is the one who gives us the increase, and of that increase we're going to return it to the Lord.
Right. And sometimes that small first step is exactly that. It's a first step, and they feel like they're having a part of what God is doing, and maybe they are in the flow of information of some results or some blessing that has been carried out with their, even if they have a small part. And maybe next time they say, you know what, that was good. I'm going to do more this time. Let me ask you something a little bit off the track here, and that is, do you have a way of doing estate planning or financial planning with your people so they can intentionally make arrangements for the future when they graduate and go to heaven? They leave behind some of their resources that God has asked them to steward so that they can bless mission and other work through your church?
We do. I mean, we don't do it every single year. It's been some years. It's interesting you mentioned that. At the staff meeting last week with all the pastoral team, we brought that up again and said, it's about time for us to set aside Saturday or something to do some estate planning. We bring in somebody who knows what they're doing on the estate side, and then we have a pastor or two who engages on the more theological side. Here's why you do this. Here's what we believe the scriptures have to say about this. So we bring in somebody, it's usually a Christian as well, but who says, this is how we can set this up in terms of making it happen. And then we want to also engage in it from a biblical worldview and say, here's why we do these kind of things. So it's time for us to do it again. We don't do it every single year. And again, we're a non-denominational church, so we don't have those ties like, some Baptist churches in America that have 150 years of history and 150 years of people who have been given these amounts of funds that they now have to draw on.
Yeah.
I throw out Baptist simply because Presbyterians do the same thing, and Methodists and everybody else does as well. But I grew up Roman Catholic. There was a lot of that in our local parish. There was a lot of dollars from people who had passed, a long time ago. So.
Right. When God's heart moves a pastor's heart, he gets in the driver's seat of the bus and he paints the mission statement on the side of the bus, just creating a visual here for us, Jim. Okay, so one last step, measuring success. I put that in quotes. But what does progress or what does faithfulness or what do results tell us? How can we measure so we might feel right and good about what we're saying and doing, but there needs to be some sort of results, you would think. So how do you measure success over, let's say, 3 and 5 years? What does it look like? Well,
what we want to see ultimately is people coming to know the Lord, right? I mean, this is the goal of missions. It is the gospel going out to the nation.
Right.
Now, again, evangelism and missions, we don't always measure by saying, okay, someone gave their life to Jesus, because there's a spectrum by which people are engaged with the gospel. They may not respond at that time, and now they're better prepared for the next time someone engages with the missions or with evangelism or the gospel. So there is that line by which we're trying to engage in multiple different ways. So at least for us, when I came in, it was in 2 years we'd like to have our missions giving drawn down to people we know and we can engage with. We want to have people involved in our missions team who have a heart and passion for missions and aren't just doing it because they're doing it. And so we were able to do that by and large within a couple of years to bring things down. And then we were able to begin to set aside dollars to send our own people on short-term mission trips. I know there's a lot of debate, short-term mission trips, you don't see a lot of people coming to know Jesus. I understand it. What you do see is people engaging, and I think I've already said this, and coming back with a heart for the gospel and for missions, and that can set a foundation in the local church. And tell me, after 12 years, we have this beautiful foundation at Life Point. It's not perfect, but a beautiful foundation of people, not just a missions team, but a group, literally hundreds of people now who have gone out on short-term mission trips where we have said, we're going to meet you halfway. We'll pay, if it's your first trip, half of it is taken care of.
Yeah.
You raise support for half, we'll take care of half. We're going to get you out there, whether it's locally, internationally, within the States, and then you can come back and you're going to give a report on what you learned, how did you meet God and what God is doing out there.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I don't need to tell you, you already know this. 99% of the time, people come back and say, hey, either I had an incredible experience and I am pumped, or that was really, really hard, but at least I know now.
Yeah.
I want to engage. Very rarely do you have people say, yeah, I'm not interested in
Right.
that. So us, it was, what's the goal? Let's get our own people out there short term. Let's draw things down. Let's do that in the next 3 years or so. Let's see the messaging go out and see if people are responding, if God is blessing, so that, quite frankly, on a quantitative basis, are we seeing more mission dollars? And that's what we've seen. We've seen every single year that number go up, and up, so that we're engaging more and more with our dollars. We're seeing more and more people going. Obviously, last year was an outlier with COVID, but more people going. And quite frankly, now seeing an entire foundation of young people, and not always young people, mostly young people who are saying, I think God is calling me to go out on the mission field.
Yes.
And to say, we are now a sending church.
Yeah.
We're sending our own people. In fact, we've gotten to the point now, it's a wonderful thing to have to say. I mean, it's hard for people who call on us asking for money, but to say, if we don't know you, if you're not part of our local congregation, as of right now, all of our dollars are going to prepare people from LifePoint to go out full time on the mission field. We can't have somebody calling us from somebody we don't know and saying, hey, I'd like to come talk to your church.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't care about that. We do. We just have so many within our own congregation ready to go. By all means, we should be the ones supporting them and not asking them to go call people they don't know. We're here for you. If you're going to go on the missions from LifePoint Church, you know you have mission dollar support, prayer support, the type of support you're going to need to get engaged and ready to go out on the mission field. And that's been a great thing to see. Now, that's taken more than 3 to 5 years, but those were exponential moves.
Sure, right.
Now that we've done this, here's a foundation. Let's build on that foundation. Now we've done this. Here's the foundation. Let's build on that foundation. So God has blessed us in that. And look, it's not just me. I mean, there's a lot of people in our congregation now who love the gospel and love the concept of missions. I don't have to be the Pied Piper. I'm engaging with people in this endeavor.
Yeah, excellent. So I think we want to say, you and I want to say to pastors, status quo doesn't cut it. If you're doing the same old thing for years, we want you to wake up. We want you to hear God's heart, because He will move your heart. If He moves the members, the lay people and the leadership, and moves the pastors, some amazing things are going to happen, kind of full circle to where we were earlier in the show, because God will do some amazing things. So, Jim, I was going to ask you, as we kind of wrap things up here, about how our listening audience could pray for you, and that's still okay. But I wonder if you could just take a minute and pray for us, pray for the pastors and churches that we hope to be impacted by this clear message that you're giving. Would you do that? Pray for our listeners.
Yeah. Father, for all those who are tuning in right now, I pray that you would set within them a heart that is aflame, on fire, for the gospel, for the nations, for the pastors who are listening, Lord, for their congregation, that they, Lord, would have a heart that would be strong enough and loud enough, that others within the congregation would see it and hear it and respond to it and resonate with it. And we would just begin to see, Lord God, a movement in local churches across America engaging with their community, engaging with their state, engaging with their nation, engaging globally for missions and for the gospel and for the Great Commission. So I pray, Lord, that you would, again, just set our hearts on fire, Lord. As Jeremiah said, it's like a fire within me. I cannot not do this. And so I pray that would be true for each one of us, Lord God, particularly for those of us who are placed by your grace and by your wisdom in positions of leadership. And I pray in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This has been Pastor Jim Gregory, Life Point Church in Indianapolis area. By the way, we talk to pastors across the country, but also around the world. So sometimes we mention geography and sometimes we don't, but I really appreciate this. And so that's it. This is the afterwards portion of the episode called When God's Heart Moves a Pastor's Heart. And folks, do get in touch with us. Go to mercytoday.global. Tell us what's on your mind. Give us some feedback. We'd love to connect with you. So God bless you, my friend. Until next time, just keep listening to God and do what he says.